and they held a leadership academy for family members. And we recruited 30 family members from across New York State. So every one of our regions was represented. And we were able to engage with family members who had never before spoken to someone at OPWDD, never spoken to the commissioner, never spoken to an OPWDD high-ranking official. And many had their own small family advocacy groups, but had never been connected to a large network of family advocates.
Welcome to Finding Common Ground, and this is the Dadability division. And today our guest is Dr. Hirah Mir from the New York State OPWDD, which is the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities organization. Welcome, Hirah. I'm so glad to have you here today. It's an honor for me also to be able to talk to you. I've talked to you on several occasions and things like that, and some of the projects that I have been working on myself, and then a joint one we did with Georgetown. But before we get into any of that kind of stuff, I was wondering if maybe give us a little bit of your background, your bio. I think I read some of your bio. I think our audience would be interested in how compelling it is and how I love rags to riches type stories, and I think you have one.
Oh, thank you so much, Steve, and thank you so much for having me here. This is my first podcast, so I'm really excited, and I obviously have followed you now. I'm so excited to have met you and just learning a lot about father figures and advocacy and just about general advocacy and how important it is. But you're absolutely right. I think I have a story that many folks will identify with. My family actually, I was born in Pakistan. My family actually won the green card lottery to the United States, and like many new Americans, disability touched our life, and due to some kind of extenuating circumstances, we had to turn to government services for just being able to live and survive. So growing up, I received food stamps, I received temporary assistance for needy families, grew up in Section 8 housing, and my parents received disability services as well, temporary disability services, not developmental disability. And I have lived experience receiving government services, going to case centers, applying for Medicaid and things like that. And because of some really incredible caseworkers who looked out for my family, who really supported my mom, some folks at the shelter for unhoused people that we lived at were able to pursue higher education, get my PhD, and then my first job at OPWDD being a civil servant, which was a dream come true. And so just coming into this work in government, the work I do at OPWDD is totally driven, I would say, by my own lived experience, seeing what good government can really do and how it can really uplift families and help us live dignified lives. So thank you for having me, and thank you for being interested in learning more about me.
Yeah, I love to find out about others because when you live this kind of stuff, you think you're all alone. And going back to it, and I haven't shared this before either, Hirah, so I'll be a newbie with releasing some new information today. And my mom was a single mom with four boys. We were on welfare. I lived in Norwich, New York at the time. It was, I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but you know what I do remember? Having potatoes 3 times a day because we couldn't afford anything else. And my mom got some of those same similar programs that helped her get up. We wound up moving to the Utica area, and she wound up getting a couple jobs. She wound up getting in 3 jobs finally to get herself off the systems that were in place that helped us in the very beginning. And so I know how that was. I look back at some of the stuff. A lot of it, I don't remember some of, but the things I do remember, I understand fully why you're so compassionate, why you're the right person to be in the position that you're in, to make sure that others have similar supports and services around them that will help them going forward. Now, OPWD was your first job?
Yes, it was. I actually started when I was in graduate school. I was receiving a scholarship as a PhD student, and then my scholarship ended and I needed an internship or just needed a job. So I actually started at OPWDD as an intern, working in what was known as workforce transformation. I worked and I oversee a project called the Regional Centers for Workforce Transformation, which is now overseen, which OPWDD still funds, but we work closely with the New York Alliance for Inclusion and Innovation. And through that project, I met frontline supervisors, I met training directors, I met direct support professionals, I met self-advocates, and it really just opened up my eyes to this whole field of developmental disability and government. And it just was, I didn't know it existed as a college student, as a PhD student, really immersed in kind of academia and statistics. I immediately felt this is where I belong and this is for me. And then just being in a field and being in an environment where lived experience matters and it is an expertise and the system is built from it and for it, I was just blown away. And I thought, who are these losers who are in these jobs at OPWDD for so long? And now it's been 9.5 years. I started off on an 18-month internship, and 9.5 years later, I am now the executive lead for diversity, equity, inclusion at OPWDD. So really, I would say grew up into a professional, into a mature woman, into a stronger advocate, into a stronger leader at OPWDD and in the field of developmental disabilities. My entire 20s, an entire decade of my life, I would say, has now been in this field. Did not think that was going to be the case with my 18-month internship.
I don't think any of us picked this field that we're in. We get put into it. And I love what I do with the advocacy part of it. I especially like it when others are passionate enough to stay in the field. Too many times I've seen that people come and go in a field. And I think that stability of somebody staying in there and understanding, and like you said, grow up through it with this. You understand a lot of that. I'm trying to think the first time I met you, I think it was the Georgetown project, right? I think it's the first time we talked.
I think so. Yeah. I think we connected one-on-one. I believe it was either, it's possible it was the OPWDD commissioner who asked me to reach out, or might have asked you to reach out, and then we connected. And obviously I was leading the systems change project with Georgetown, focused on cultural linguistic competence, equity, and uplifting lived experience. And we connected. And honestly, you introduced me to being a dadvocate and really being a father figure, advocating, but also being a foster family, being a foster dad. I learned a lot from you, and I've followed you since. And since then, actually also learned that father advocacy is a national movement, in not just in developmental disabilities, but in child welfare. And so it's just amazing. I think that the universe connects you to people at exactly the right time to learn, to grow, and to hopefully build more together. And then collaborating with you and on the Georgetown project, I think just so many things have come to fruition from that. And I'm really excited to be talking to you about that today.
Yeah, that project was so interesting when I first heard about it. I wanted to do it, and I'm not really wanting. Here I have a podcast, but I don't like to be out in front and center a lot of times. Our producer will tell you that. It's just not kind of me. When you have a podcast, you have to be. But that particular experience, the reason I wanted to do it was because we hit so many boxes that I think that, which is right up your alley with diversity and inclusion. And yes, I have a 35-year-old son with disabilities and autism, but we also had almost 200 kids come through our house through foster care, most of them with disabilities, and especially even nonverbal and autism and everything else. And then we wound up adopting. We had never got into it my wife and I had never really got into it to adopt. We got into it to be the bridge to a better place. And uplift them kids into stability and all that kind of stuff. And we wound up adopting the last 3 kids in our house. Yeah. And one was an African-American, one was a Dominican, one was profoundly autistic with high needs that probably would be in an institution right now. And we just didn't want that for them. And it's just nice to know that, OPWDD exists to help with that kind of stuff. If you follow me, I'm a lone wolf and trying to get solutions and get things done, because I think sometimes bureaucracy and all that kind of stuff can get in the way. But I'm really pleased with the leadership you guys have at OPWDD right now. You guys have been so transparent, and I say this probably more than I should, but everybody that I've worked with, it's just different than a lot of times you hear out here as a parent that I can't get any services, I can't get this, and I can't get that. And myself, I'd rather go and try and put the supports and stuff around that and use you guys as support and use you guys for the self-direction type situations and all that kind of stuff. And more importantly, going back to the dad thing that you mentioned was key to me because, there's not a lot of dads involved in any of this, whether it's in foster care, whether it's in the disability and community. And even if parents are together, a lot of times it's all on the mom. I'll go to my meeting and my wife will say, and she be sitting in next to me, and there'll be 200 women in there, and there's not a single guy but me. I'm glad that movement's going on with the dads. I think it's important that the dads are involved. I think it helps with all the inclusion part, the diversity, equity, and all that kind of all those things go into the equation of trying to do what's best for our most vulnerable people. So I'm glad you're in. You're doing the position that you're in. I'm glad you're in it. I saw that you were in a documentary type thing, and that I like the fact that what you're doing with your American Nightmare, American Dream. I was wondering if you could say a few things about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Actually, I think it's great to hear the feedback from your perspective about OPWDD being transparent and having a leadership that you can work with that can really help you connect to services and help you overcome barriers. It's just ironic. Prior to my professional career as an adult, I actually, because I was receiving services and my family was receiving services, I was actually testifying against many kind of city agencies, sharing about how there were these kind of counterproductive policies that are meant to uplift you, meant to help you, quote unquote, get off welfare, but actually they're maintaining the cycle of poverty. Some policies that are making it difficult on the kind of difficult to pursue education or get a job. And I actually was someone who was testifying. I was going to fair hearing. So I actually have a lot of experience, not necessarily getting developmental disability services, but getting services from the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance, the Human Rights Administration, HRA, and some of the city agencies, the New York City agencies that give services. And so essentially, I'm in a documentary with three other incredible women from different backgrounds who we actually met in university. We met at Hunter College. We connected with a community-based organization, a very small advocacy organization called Welfare Rights Initiative. And that organization helped me to really undo the shame that I felt, that I think from you sharing your story and your mom's story, I think that children who grow up in poverty, we often have shame about the poverty that we grew up in. And that's why I think we grow up having really big hearts and wanting to make sure that the future generation doesn't grow up with that type of shame, whether it's because of the resources that they had or did not have, or maybe it's because of their religion or the language they speak or the color of their skin. So I think it is our experience growing up in that environment that pushes us to do this work. And I think I see that in the way that you contribute and the home that you've built for so many people, which honestly is just so lovely. And it's one of the beautiful things I think I've heard in my life. But essentially in the documentary, it talks about stories like that, and it follows me and three other incredible women with different backgrounds and their journey for over the course of a decade, a little bit more of accessing government services, sometimes leaning into tenant rights, working with caseworkers, working with this community-based organization to then get the services that they need, pursue higher education, move out of poverty. And then all of us, actually, you won't be surprised, went into some sort of community service or civil service. And I think just, again, that's something that's part of my personal life. But I think for the last 2 decades, I've seen how important it is to have community-based organizations that have specialty, that have expertise in working with people like us, people with disabilities, people who exist at the intersections and often fall through the gaps. It's really through these community-based organizations that we are able to survive and thrive and live a person-centered, dignified lives. And so this documentary, American Nightmare, American Dream, is something that they followed me around for more than a decade, captures my testimonies, captures me advocating, and then also talks about where I am today. and how I'm giving back. And it's just been an honor to be a part of that story, to be able to tell my story, to share that legacy with others, to capture my mom's legacy because she's featured in it as well, but also to be a part of a network of incredible New Yorkers who have gone through the same thing. But you yourself are going to be in a documentary, or are in a documentary soon to be released through our work with Georgetown. I'm really excited. I saw the clip that you were in. It was wonderful. And Georgetown has slowly been sharing with me some unedited versions, but we're really looking forward to releasing a series of documentary films that tell your story and that really tell the story of real New Yorkers who have developmental disabilities, the staff who support them, the family and the communities who care for them, but also talking about some of the disparities that still exist and how we as New Yorkers can really come together to support one another and to really build a society where people with developmental disabilities can thrive and exist.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want you to know that when you make these kinds of connections, I don't take them lightly. And actually, Michael Skinner is working on a project with me now for the bus. We got a bus here, and I don't know if you saw any of that part of it. He came here. It might be part of the documentary part of it, where we were having trouble transporting kids with autism and disabilities and even foster care, even kids in the community, because there just wasn't anything available, especially nights and weekends and stuff. And I pitched a bus to the vets organization here, and they bought it the next day. And that bus has been going for 2 years. Well, Michael Skinner from Pendragon Films, who worked with you guys with Georgetown, saw that, and he called me up and he says, I want to partner with you. Let's take this national. So we are doing something national, and it all goes back to that thread of the connectivity that we had with you guys. So a lot of people, I think, are going to be helped in those marginalized communities where something simple, we give a parent a win where they can take their family to a ball game somewhere and not be charged. There's no charge. And in the evening or something, or to a doctor's appointment, or somebody in a wheelchair can't get an Uber and they can't get a ride. That bus provides that. And our goal is, like I said, hopefully 2 in every state in our first year. And we'll go from there and try and we would like one in everywhere. But again, I can't stress enough, that doesn't happen without you guys connecting with a family and a parent and somebody down on the ground, so to speak, who lives this every single day. I have to thank you again and again for that.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think just as I think I started by saying that when I think us coming together leads to so many other things in fruition. And it's just exciting that you continue to work with that documentary filmmaker, Michael, and that you're taking some of this work national. That essentially is the point. New York State is leading the country in delivering person-centered services for people with developmental disabilities, but new Americans as well, helping to overcome language barriers. We are one of the few states, maybe one of 2 or 3, that has a language access law that makes sure that that we speak to people, we give them services, we give them resources in the language that they speak, that they choose. And with people with developmental disabilities, many don't use speech to communicate. And luckily in New York State, we have regulations and we have laws that require agencies like OPWDD to communicate in the manner that people need to be communicated with. And that's incredible. I think taking it national is so important. We need to raise awareness, not just for other New Yorkers, but across the nation. There are so many people in other states. Disability touches all of our lives. And I'm very lucky that I'm a DEI practitioner in New York State, but I have many national colleagues working in states where they don't have the support or the vision from their elected officials, or maybe the needs are still there. People still exist. People with disabilities still exist. Families still have the resources, but you have to help them in private. You have to keep it a little hush hush, which limits how you can speak, how you can raise awareness, limits the connections that we can make. So just really excited, but do want to acknowledge that we are in a state where this is the norm, and we are going to continue with that. And that's definitely a blessing, and I don't take that for granted. I mean, I see your Yankee hat. We're Mets fans, so I'm going to ignore that. But I think we agree. But I think we agree that New York is the best state.
Absolutely. You guys do lead in all of this. And you learn this all as you go along, because now that you started as a just local advocate for my son and it went up bigger, but I'm doing a lot more nationals, and I'm talking to a lot of parents on the ground. They don't have anything close to what we have in New York. And this is what I try to tell parents sometimes, that we have to, it can't be a constant attack to OPWDD or any of the other OMH or any of the other agencies that are out there trying to help, because if you were living in several other states, you would be getting nothing. And those parents are the ones that are calling me. Can you come down here and help us build something from the scratch from some of this stuff, because they don't have it. So I hope that New York continues to keep leading on that kind of stuff. Do you have a big office? Your particular what you're working on in your office, is it? I don't know how many people are in your department. And
Yeah. So I'm the executive lead, and I oversee an office of diversity, equity, inclusion. We call it the Executive Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at OPWDD. We have a total of 13 staff, actually, so which is really impressive. I think I believe
I didn't even know that. That's great.
Actually, in New York State, we have an Executive Order 187, which mandates that New York State agencies like OPWDD hire an executive lead for diversity, equity, inclusion, especially agencies that have over 500 staff. OPWDD actually, fun fact, is the largest New York State agency of all the agencies under state government. We have close to 20,000 employees. And so I am the Chief Diversity Officer for the largest New York State agency, which is just an incredible honor. And like you, starting at the local level, when I was working with the community-based organization, Welfare Rights Initiative, that taught me to advocate for myself, I never would have imagined that I would have this role, that I would be a leader in government. I didn't see myself as a leader. And it took years to see myself that way. But no, my office is incredible. We've had the support of several members of OPWDD leadership, which is important because I truly am not in this alone. We partner with our Chief Financial Officer. We partner with our Deputy Commissioner of Regional Offices. We partner with our Deputy Commissioner of Quality Improvement. I have a really strong partnership with our General Counsel, and that allows me and my team of specialists to really weave cultural linguistic competence, have real conversations about equity and inequity with all of these really important leaders, and to understand how we can truly update protocols, policies, practices internally and for the betterment of people with disabilities. But a lot of this work is driven by an executive order that mandates that we have a DEI lead, and specifically mandates that we combat harassment, discrimination, and advance diversity, equity, inclusion within our organization. And another fun fact is that I believe there are more than 60 agencies under New York State government who fall under this executive order. So I exist not just in the developmental disabilities field, but I exist in a community of DEI practitioners all over New York State. And I think that's been a theme of your work and a theme of my work and a theme of our discussion is community. And what's great about not just the developmental disabilities community, but the community focused on diversity and inclusion is that we exist in community with one another. We talk to each other. We share best practices. We get really deep. We talk about barriers. We talk about racism, ableism in the workplace. And we talk about how we can make sure that the New York State workforce is understanding what it means, what ableism looks like, what racism looks like, what the intersection of these things looks like in the workplace, and also for New Yorkers who rely on government services. So just really incredible. And yes, a great team. And I believe civil service would have to confirm this for me. I believe that my team, given we are the largest agency, might be the largest DEI team currently of any of the other chief diversity officers that I've spoken to. So very exciting. And again, to your point, shows the commitment that OPWDD has made, and shows, I think part of it is because our field was built on inclusion. It was made from family advocacy. It came to be, OPWDD came to be due to gross injustices that were taking place in Willowbrook. And so it's a no-brainer that we would invest in diversity, equity, inclusion, because that essentially is the work of disability, of developmental disability. It's just that I have a team of specialists who are even more focused on uplifting communities and families and making sure that we take a look at the disparities.
Yeah, get yourself out there with the awareness part of it. You didn't really realize. I think when you get so wrapped up in our day-to-day lives, you don't realize some of this stuff. And what woke me up to the inequities in diversity and inclusion was the foster care system, because it was so obvious that, because we knew the kids coming into our home, they were predominantly one ethnicity in our particular area, and you could see the inequities, and you could see the things. And because me personally, I want to find a solution to some of this stuff rather than just keep going down the same rabbit holes that for so long have gone on. It's why I think the parents need to be at the tables for all this kind of stuff when you do DEI. So I know myself as a parent, I would absolutely be all in on any of that kind of stuff. If you guys ever have a task force or community advisors and things like that for it, because of that lived experience is so important. And like I said, my eyes were opened up to so much because of what I do, but they probably wouldn't have been opened up. And I think there's a lot of parents, and I spend a lot of time trying to do teaching moments, not with the kids that come through our home, but also the parents, whether it's the bio parents or the foster parents. It could be community people, because the future of our country and the state is our children, and we can't have inequities. We can't have people not doing inclusion at this time in everybody's life. We just can't. I appreciate what you guys are doing with the DEI things. And more importantly, I think that you guys are listening. And I tell Commissioner Bear all the time, that wasn't always the case. And I can say that because I'm just a parent. It wasn't always the case, because a lot of times, I've been doing this a long time, and we just didn't feel heard. And I think leadership starts at the top, and when true leadership is, and when you've got somebody that's open and listening to somebody on way in the bottom, it's telling, but it's more, that's how you get things done. Because I think what happens I came out of the manufacturing. I was just telling the story that I worked for Xerox, and they had 67% line efficiencies in the plant. And there was a diverse population working there of multiple people from we're a huge, in Utica's a huge immigrant base for a lot of people coming in. And they were running 67% with it. And they hired me from the outside. They'd never hired anybody from the outside before at Xerox for this plant in New Hartford. And they brought me in, and I learned from the people at the bottom more than I ever learned from anybody at the top. And I sat there in all those jobs. I learned those jobs. I asked them their opinion, and to the person, every single one of them had a way to do it better. Hirah, every single person. And when I left there, the lines were running 107, 108%. And the reason is because I listened to people from the bottom. And this is why lots of people tell me, geez, you have a likening for OPWDD. Look, I could tell you privately some of the issues I've had with OPWDD and stuff like that. But the bigger point out of it is you guys are listening. And I can take this, something that might be bothering a family, I can take it to somebody, and somebody at top is going to listen. And I hope that you guys continue to maintain that approach of listening to the people on the bottom, on the people, and you were right up that alley. You've been a rock star from speaking out and advocating for your career, and because you were I don't want to make it sound bad. We were both of us were at the bottom, so to speak. Yes. We had to kind of crawl our way out, and I hope you guys continue to stay with all of that and continue to listen, because I think it's important. We know that, I especially know that you can't give us a yes every single time, but you know what? We have a voice and we're being heard. And then maybe with collaboration and partnership, we can find a way to fix some of this stuff.
Yeah, but I will give you a yes right now that yes, we are absolutely going to continue this work. We have a lot of things in the works that I'd like to share with you. And to your point that we have to get out there, we have to share these things, we have to continue to listen, we have to continue to learn and talk about what we've heard, and then we have to continue to work together to truly transform the system to meet people where they are at and to truly meet their needs related to culture, language, access, just truly be person-centered, which is what all of this is about. But last year, Georgetown held several leadership academies for us. They held 2 leadership academies for people with developmental disabilities, one in Albany, one in New York City, and they held a leadership academy for family members. And we recruited 30 family members from across New York State. So every one of our regions was represented. And we were able to engage with family members who had never before spoken to someone at OPWDD, never spoken to the commissioner, never spoken to an OPWDD high-ranking official. And many had their own small family advocacy groups, but had never been connected to a large network of family advocates. And we were able, through my office, through the diversity, equity, inclusion lens, we were able to reach out to people, work with them behind the scenes, get them prepared to be a part of this huge advocacy academy, this leadership academy that with Georgetown, which can be very intimidating. And so we are in contact with those family members. At the end of last year, the graduates of those academies came together with some of our provider partners, with the entire OPWDD leadership team, and we got together when we talked about what are the biggest barriers that we're experiencing in the developmental disability system, and what are the key areas that OPWDD and our provider network should work on. So those are some of the things that Georgetown University is still working on for us, compiling those things into a report, releasing that information. But specifically, the family members and the people that we engaged with, they want to continue the engagement. They want to work with the DEI team. They want to work with the commissioner, and they want to be represented on our existing statutory boards and councils and on non-statutory boards and councils that regularly meet with the commissioner. You and I, of course, we started from the bottom, but we had the privilege, the knowledge, maybe the education, the language to speak to government officials, and many folks don't. So something that my team and I are working on this year is creating the infrastructure and making sure that we can continue to engage with family members from last year who graduated from these academies, engage with people with developmental disabilities, but also build a meaningful, ongoing communication channel with them, with my team, with the commissioner, and make sure that there is representation of people of diverse backgrounds, different languages, different lived experiences, different socioeconomic statuses in the current boards and councils that OPWDD oversees. And I think to your point, we do need the father perspective. We need the youth perspective as well. And we need the perspective of new Americans, people who have a number of immigration challenges and communities that are very vulnerable within the DD community, and as well as giving a space for people who communicate using other means and listening to them. And so right now we don't have a lot of that representation on our boards and councils. We've been trying, we're trying, but now we have this work that we did through Georgetown, through DEI, and really trying to bring those worlds together so that truly people, like you said, can have a seat at the table, and the table is ready, and it's inclusive, and it's respectful, and everyone can contribute in a dignified way. As sometimes people like us, we're very well educated, we have experience, we've learned to be leaders in the field. Sometimes we are given more room, more space, more room to talk. Maybe we're listened to, maybe we're seen when we enter the table, but a lot of families haven't had that opportunity. And so we're really working with family members who have not yet had that opportunity to advocate or be heard, be seen. We're really trying to do some of that work this year. So, we are going to continue. Last year, the work that you and I did, that was just about listening. Now we have to learn and we have to transform. So that is absolutely the priority for my team and my office. And it is absolutely the priority. We have the blessing of the commissioner and our entire leadership team. So could definitely use your support there, spreading the word and helping us to build those inclusive spaces within family advocacy, within provider advocacy, and within our boards and councils. So hopefully that makes you feel like, yes, there's a plan, things are going, we're going to get stronger. And we're also getting stronger during very challenging times, whereas where it is scary. It is scary to exist with a disability. It is scary to exist as an immigrant. It's scary to exist as a person of color, frankly. And it's also scary for many communities to interact with government that has previously done harm not too long ago. And so we have to keep that lived experience in mind, is that many communities, including developmental disabilities communities, there's trauma, there's generational trauma there because of things and harm that was done by government, by institutions not too long ago. So not
Yeah.
to end on
No.
to end on that, but just
You guys are full confidence in the leadership you guys have. Every single person I've talked to in your whole leadership and the commissioner's staff and the side support staff have been wonderful. I try to tell parents all the time, like the single moms that don't have time to call you, and I know you talked on that point. And I'm glad you're listening to them. I'm glad you guys are realizing that there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of people who don't feel heard. It's not any fault of OPWDD. I just think they're so busy in their lives. They might have a nonverbal child and they're trying to work and they don't have any help and they're just trying to exist, and so to speak. And the other point I wanted to make is I'm a firm believer with the youth. Our youth is our future, and many foster kids, when they tell me they transition from OCFS in the foster care system agency over to OPWDD, because many have disabilities, they tell me that they come back and tell me they didn't feel heard. Nobody listened to them. And so anytime you guys can get youth on those things, they want to be heard and in all of this stuff.
No, definitely. I've been thinking about the future generation, the future of advocacy within the developmental disability space. And in speaking to youth, what's really important is that when youth do come to these existing conversations, these existing boards, these existing councils, that it is a safe space for them. And I think that goes for anyone from a marginalized community who has not yet had a seat at the table, that when they do come to the table, that they're treated with respect, they're treated as equals, that they are treated as with dignity. And sometimes in these existing spaces, we need to get ready. We need to get ready to diversify. We need to get ready to be inclusive before we invite youth, before we invite someone who doesn't communicate the way that we communicate, before we invite someone who is a working parent and a single working parent and doesn't necessarily have the time or the means or just hasn't been a part of that culture of advocacy yet.
Right.
I think that's incredibly important for us, not just on the OPWDD side, but all of us who have historically sat on these boards and councils and have that relationship. But actually, just this week, I met someone who you might know, Troy, at OCFS, who is the lead for the fatherhood initiative there, and had a really amazing conversation with Troy exactly about that, is how to make sure that existing spaces that have their kind of traditional culture of advocacy are inclusive and ready to include fathers in the conversation, to include youth in the conversation, to include new Americans, to include people who communicate in languages other than English or do not use speech to communicate. And that is some of the work that we do need to do as a field with our community-based organizations, with our providers. And you're absolutely right. It's not just OPWDD. In speaking to Troy, this is something we see in the advocacy space in OCFS, the Office of Children and Family Services, Department of Health, all across the board. We need to be thinking about the future generation of advocacy and really making room in our kind of statutory government mandated spaces, but also in some of our informal non-statutory spaces as well. It's so critically important. People with disabilities are going to continue to exist. Poverty still exists. We are still going to have people with different immigrant backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, linguistic backgrounds. We exist. And so how do we engage people in the future generation of advocacy and let them know that they belong? That's going to be a super duper team community effort.
Said. Any other comments before we wrap up? I certainly enjoyed having you on. I think you were enlightening to a lot of the parents who listen to our podcast, and I think it's so beneficial. Again, I'm glad that you came on. Thank you for that.
No, I was really glad that you uplifted Utica and the immigrant base in Utica. I think that often people think that when it comes to immigration or new Americans, it's really focused on New York City, and that is where it exists. But in doing some of this work, and actually, I've been a partner to the New York State Office for New Americans for 7 years now. And we know that immigrant communities and families who are experiencing language barriers and speak languages other than English, they exist all across New York State, not just New York City. And I think that is incredibly important for OPWDD, for our providers, for family groups, that if you are in one of these areas, just thinking about reaching out to the immigrant community, reaching out and diversifying your network and really learning more about the county that you're in, the community that you're in, from that perspective, is going to make sure that all people with developmental disabilities, regardless of their status, regardless of their income, the language that they speak, regardless of the type of disability that they have, are actually connected not just to OPWDD, but to family advocates, self-advocates that can help them and that can let them know that there is nothing wrong with you. You are okay. You will be okay. And you deserve services. And we can help you get those services. I really think that we are in this together. We have a shared mission. And honestly, this is, I think, the longest I've spoken to you. I didn't realize we had so much in common. And I'm just so incredibly honored to have met you. And I just feel like I don't have to explain much. I think you just know where my heart is at as a personally and why I'm doing this work.
It's interesting you mentioned about the language, because one of our schools here, it's a pretty large school system in Utica, and they have over 40 languages spoken at school. Wow. 40. Wow. So it tells you that we are a melting pot in the middle of the state, and why it's so important that they're included. We have diversity. There's equity in all of this, whether it's the disability community or not.
Yeah, no, 40, I'm not surprised, although I'm just really glad that you are in the know and that you just are such an incredible advocate, more than I originally knew. But OPWDD, we actually have provided services in the last year in 60 languages. So there is a need within the developmental disability community. And so that means that there are people reaching out to us, asking for information, asking for services in more than 60 languages. And that just shows you how diverse New York State is and how diverse the community of people with developmental disabilities are. And that's essentially what our work is about.
Hirah, thanks again for coming on. Till next time, this is Finding Common Ground, Dadability, Steve, and our great guest we had today, Dr. Hirah Mir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Continue the conversation by joining our Facebook group. If you're a fan of the show, please join our supporters club. Subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your favorite listening app, but most of all, share it with your friends. Just one more click or comment can make a huge difference and help us to continue finding common ground.